An unbearable tragedy. That's how Benjamin Netanyahu described the loss of 3 hostages who were accidentally killed by Israeli forces in Gaza.
The IDF continues to press into Gaza, and they've discovered the biggest Hamas tunnel yet. Israelis are calling it an underground city of terror. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has more.
Israel is in mourning over the 3 hostages mistakenly killed by IDF soldiers Friday. The hostages had spelled out a sign outside their building that said, "Save us hostages," in Hebrew, with leftover food. They were also carrying a stick with a white cloth and were unarmed and shirtless, yet they were mistaken for terrorists.
It broke my heart, broke the entire nation's heart, and our hearts go to the families at this tough hour. At this difficult time, it's important for me to also send support to our warriors. They sacrificed their souls to achieve a crushing victory over our enemies and to return our abducted.
In an address to the nation, Netanyahu said military pressure is necessary to free the hostages.
We will learn the lessons, we will apply the lessons, and we will not let go of the military and political effort to bring all the hostages home.
Israel is reportedly considering another temporary ceasefire to free more hostages. Hamas still holds more than 100 people taken captive on October 7th, more than 2 months ago. On the war front, Israel uncovered a massive tunnel close to the Erez Crossing, the only place where Palestinians were allowed to cross into Israel for work and medical treatment before the war.
This is no ordinary tunnel. It's a city, an underground city of terror that Hamas dug and built instead of investing money in the residents of Gaza.
The 2.5-mile-long tunnel was 165 feet underground at some points, with plumbing, electricity, and communication lines.
The tunnel that was uncovered was used, among other things, to carry out offensive activities against our forces in the Gaza Strip. A few days ago, terrorists were also identified in the tunnel and were eliminated by the Israel Defense Forces.
Despite the tunnel and other revelations, pressure is mounting on Israel for a ceasefire. The United Nations Security Council could vote as early as today on a new ceasefire resolution drafted by the United Arab Emirates. U.S. Defense Secretary Austin arrives in Israel today, where he's expected to press Israel on its timetable for transitioning to a less intense phase of fighting. Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen met with his French counterpart Catherine Colonna in Tel Aviv, who called for an immediate ceasefire to free more hostages and deliver more aid to the people of Gaza.
An immediate truce is necessary.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will press ahead until its objectives are met.
We will achieve all of our goals, the elimination of Hamas, the release of all of our hostages, and a promise that Gaza will not once again become a center of terror, incitement against the state of Israel, and attack the state of Israel.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, the pressure should not be on Israel. The pressure should always be where it rightfully belongs. It should be on Hamas. And until Hamas releases the hostages, until Hamas unconditionally surrenders, lays down all their weapons, gives complete access to all their terror tunnels, then the pressure should stay on them. They're the reason this war is happening. And the world needs to recognize that. Do I have sympathy for the civilians who are being killed in this? Absolutely. But it's Hamas that's the problem. It's not the IDF. It's Hamas that attacked. And Israel has a right to defend itself and to make sure it's never attacked again. Ceasefires just allow Hamas to reload. And in that reloading, who are the oppressed people? The Palestinian people. They're the ones suffering under Hamas. Hamas has to go, and it has to go now. More than 450 Israeli soldiers have died in the war. Nearly 4% of Israel's population is now serving in the military. And Caitlin Burke reports, dying in defense of the nation has always been a risk of daily life in Israel.
All Israeli citizens over the age of 18 are required to serve in the military, with very few exceptions. The mandatory service began with the establishment of the Jewish state in 1948, And now, 75 years later, it's still considered essential to the security of Israel.
I remember when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, I had a conversation with my father, and I asked him, what would I do in the army when it would be my time to go to the army? And he then told me an answer that I think many Israelis in different generations heard from their parents. And he told me that he hopes that when I would be 18 and it would be time to go to the army, we wouldn't need the army anymore.
A dream that has yet to become a reality. Aya Elia's father saw all of his children join the Israel Defense Forces, and one never came home.
My brother, it was September 1997, and it was a special military mission of the Israeli commando, I guess what you call the Navy SEALs. And there were 16 warriors going inside Lebanon, inside a small village called Ansariya, when they walked inside a Hezbollah ambush. They started fire. Eventually that night, 11 warriors of that initial 16 were killed. One of them were left behind. This is my older brother, Itamar. Hezbollah held on to his remains for another 10 months before his body was brought back.
As part of her healing process, Aya recently released a documentary called Knock on the Door, a phrase which she says Israelis instantly recognize.
This is something we live. We live in the waiting, the horrific waiting for that knock, because the death of soldiers is so common and something so inherent to the Israeli day-to-day life.
While all Israeli families must prepare for the news of loss, they aren't left alone to deal with it. When Ronnie Mermelstein's brother died in combat, she recalls support her family received as one of her most vivid memories.
One of the most important things that I remember is that our house was full of people, and friends and family, and also people that we don't know who came to our house to support the family.
Now, both Ronnie and Aya are associated with the Atelef Foundation, an organization that ensures Israeli Navy SEALs and their families receive care in life and in death.
The families become part of the community, so they know they have always someone that they can reach to and someone that will embrace the family.
The foundation's sister organization, American Friends of Israeli Navy SEALs, has raised millions of dollars since this current war began to provide families of soldiers with multiple needs, from housing to childcare. And when a soldier falls, they make sure that feared knock on the door will not be the last one the family receives. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Well, that's an inside look at life in Israel and the reason that life exists in Israel. The reason that the knock on the door can happen is the murderous ideology of the Palestinians. And whether it's coming from Hamas or the Palestinian Authority, where the PA literally rewards the families of terrorists, and they reward them based on the number of Israelis that a terrorist kills. So if you're going to be arrested for terrorist acts, you're going to go to prison, you know the Palestinian Authority is now going to put your family on a monthly salary because of what you did. This is horrific ideology. And to hear it on college campuses that somehow Israel is a colonial power or a apartheid state. The apartheid state is the Palestinian Authority. If you're Jewish, you can't live there. If you're Jewish, you can't work there. If you're Jewish, you can't visit there. They won't let it happen. And here's something that many people don't know. If you're a Palestinian and you sell land to a Jewish person, it's a capital offense. They're going to try you, they're going to convict you, and they're going to execute you because you sold something to a Jew. If that's not apartheid, if that's not horrible, I don't know what is. Let us as Christians stand with Israel and say, not on our watch. You don't get to do this. You don't get to perpetrate these kinds of lies to say You know, it's an apartheid colonial state. You don't get to march through our cities and say from the river to the sea. There is no context for that. I will disagree with all of those university presidents that said there's some kind of context for it. There is no context for that. You're calling for the genocide of the Jewish people. It needs to stop, and it needs to stop today.